Welcome everyone. We're glad you're here. Today we're joined by Krish Vazirani. Krish, you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me, guys. My name is Krish. I graduated from Limerick High School and going to UNC Chapel Hill for my undergrad. I'll be doing CS and business, and I was in my DECA chapter for 3 years, so since sophomore year. And yeah, it was a blast. I learned a lot.
All right, that's great. Could you share a little bit about what led you into HTPS?
Yeah, definitely. So the truth is that when I joined sophomore year, I joined on the whim. So I just joined because of a friend, and I didn't really know what to expect. So a lot of people in DECA do that. I wanted my workload to be easy, so I asked my chapter president, which was the easiest cluster, and they said hospitality and tourism. Came to find out 3 years later, it's not the easiest cluster, but I also wanted something that didn't have too much, I guess, technical work. So professional selling events are all like slideshow based, thankfully. And that's kind of why I chose that subsection. And then from then onwards, I think that area of doing presentations is what really stuck to me. So that's why I kept going with it.
Okay, and I guess just from there, what led you into the professional selling events and I guess specifically into HTPS?
For sure. Yeah. I think that I think the flexibility you had with professional selling to really embody or choose whichever company you wanted um, was pretty nice. It gave a lot of like freedom and like less stress to go with. And I also do think that you were able to really shape the experience you want for your judge. Because you can go about it like 100 different ways when you do the professional selling events. And then HTTPS, I think I liked it much more than FCE or PSE, is because it was much more on the personal interactions and I guess human interactions, which is I guess more of my strong point. So they probably valued more about how you're speaking, like what your approach is, rather than necessarily the technicalities. So that's what.
All right, that's cool. And into some like generic deco questions, what advice would you give to see success in role plays, and what advice would you give for like writtens?
For sure, yeah. I did, role play and written every single year, and I switched it up pretty frequently. I think the biggest thing for both is having confidence. That can take you, that can basically make you like get first place, even if you're not saying necessarily the most outstanding or original stuff. Obviously, that's like there's a baseline you have to meet. But for role plays and written events, stuff that you can control apart from the downtime, working on your written plan or your presentation, the stuff you can really, really control is how you speak, what you say, what you notice. And there's small things, that really help you stand out, like addressing the judge by the name in a certain fashion. So, there's a lot of similarities and overlaps between both events. Thankfully, for my sophomore year, I did HTTPS and I chose that, but then ICDC, and then my junior year, I chose BTDM at ICDC, and then senior year back to HTTPS. So I think don't necessarily always stick to one event, like try to switch it up because you'll learn a lot and they can both complement each other.
Okay, and I guess now we can hop into really for your future, what you want to pursue. How would you say, like, what was the biggest thing, or I guess some of the biggest things that DECA has helped you with in leading into that?
Yeah. Could you repeat that question, like the ending of it?
Yeah, yeah. So whatever you want to do in the future, whatever it might be, right? What would you say are some of the biggest things that DECA actually gave that are going to help you going into your future?
For sure. Yeah. I think, especially for professional selling is the biggest thing. Some of these like case studies and role plays, sometimes maybe unrealistic, but I think it's the approach of the unknown. You don't know which judge you have. You don't know what type of stature he is, where he comes from. I think a lot of times in business, that's a lot of stuff you're going to face is really trying to tackle stuff that you have no clue about. And I've faced this like outside of DECA as well. And I think that the skills you get on how to confidently present stuff and the skills you get in the preparation process, which is really knowing your content like down to a T, is very useful. The people who stand out in professional selling events and also TDM events are those who have 110% like certainty of their knowledge and that they've like done their research. So whichever company you choose, whichever resort you're representing, whichever, you know, director of marketing you're at, you just have to really, really know everything. And that's really what sales is about, is that, you know, if any question that comes, you're able to solve it. So in real life, that's also what it complements and helps with.
All right, that's cool. Now let's get into some more specific questions. So, what would you say is the biggest way to stand out, especially in like these role playing or personal selling events?
Yeah, I think there's two different things. There's the content, and then delivery. So in the content, I think it's very important that you choose something that is built up. So a lot of people like to choose these boutique firms, boutique, you know, companies, stuff that's low key. I do not recommend that in my personal opinion, because I feel though representing someone that you have to sell yourself a lot more, and the reassurance that the judge gets in terms of the credibility of your content is also lower if you're having or representing a company that's doing 100 million in sales versus some company that's making $200,000 off of like some bedroom. You're going to have a much better leap in the confidence of your ability. So it really all loops back to confidence, and that's for content. And I think for delivery, the biggest thing is having some type of signature style. So that's how you stand out. You have to have some way that the judge will remember you. And I can guarantee you it's probably not going to be the content. It's definitely going to be the way you're speaking and the way you're engaging with them. So, you know, having the humor is definitely important. There's lots of baseline standards you're going to have to meet, you know, such as obviously nowadays, you know, before when I joined DECA, I didn't know anything. It's kind of have to like learn as time goes on, build off of what you know. But you know, addressing them by their name, the way you shake their hands, like etc. That's all the baseline standards. Then the signature style. So for me, what really worked was having like what I said, right? Having the confidence and then just making sure that they feel reassured that I've done every single part of my research and they have nothing to worry about. So that was what I really went for. Some other people really like to engage with you know, humor a lot. Some people like to engage necessarily with the type of, you know, voice they're going with. There's so many like details you can really break it down to and work on each and every single detail until you sum it all up. And I think practice really helps. So, you know, at your chapters, I do recommend to practice with your officers or ICDC winners because they'll point out stuff that you're probably not noticing. And that's really what matters at the end of the day.
Okay, thanks so much. And I guess kind of looking more into how it goes specifically during a conference, right? Give us kind of pre-conference, like what's your preparation schedule looking like maybe in that month leading up or in that week leading up? What are you doing in order to make sure you're ready?
Yeah, I think again, it depends on the event, obviously, but for professional selling, it's an event that there should be no excuses on. So role plays, you know, you can skip out because you don't know the case study, you don't know what you're supposed to expect. There should be no room for error for any type of presentation, specifically for, you know, PSC because it's just a presentation. The pre-conference, I would say that it takes time. So again, iterations. For me, I perfected what I was doing by the third year, right? But then every conference onwards, I learned some like 50% more than what I knew before. So the way to really tackle that before like going to like, because obviously you only have 3 conferences a year. I'd say do as many role plays as possible with people or sorry, like practice presentations. Don't shy away. Don't say that, you know, like you need to take some time or you need to like spend some time to work on your content, like practice your delivery because your content can be refined at 3 a.m. in the night, you know, when everyone's sleeping, but with the delivery you need actual human interaction to see if it's actually working or not. So for me, like that was what my pre-conference was built upon. But I think that at some point it's going to become muscle memory. At some point it's become second habit that you're just going to start to know what exactly to say without having to memorize anything. and that'll obviously take some time. Like by my third year, I didn't have to prepare at all, but my first year, like, you should start. So that's my recommendation.
All right, that's cool. And more into like how you prepare for it, like during role plays, how do you really think of examples for the presentation? Do you like come up like on the spot, or how do you like think of it pre-conference?
Um, yeah, no, on the spot is 100% like the way to go, for like 60% of stuff. So for my ICDC, the year I won third place, which was this year, ICDC, you have when you develop like a style of how you speak, you always look for some type of judge that you're looking for. Sometimes some people may be looking for like an old like guy who's working at a company. Some people may be working for like a young person who maybe understands newer stuff. You're always looking for something. For me, like last year, it was definitely a old guy or old girl who is able to understand like more mature activities, like hiking, etc. But at my final presentation, I was hit with a complete curveball. So I had to think on the spot. And that is really where the practice shows if it's working or not. And you have to practice with different people. So present to your parents, present to your friends, present to, other people. And then you'll start to see what each and every sub age group or person really goes for. So you're really basing your sales pitch differently in some sense. Like obviously your baseline is going to be standard, but you're really basing like a good 75% of it completely differently for who you're presenting to, because everyone has a different need. And in terms of impromptu reactions, like you have to read the person as you go. It takes a lot of time and practice. And it may be a little like you may mess up, you may say or but when you have it down, you're able to see the way they're reacting. You're able to see the way they're engaging with you. And based on that, you can change your pace, you can change your style, you can even change your content. So that's what I'm saying. If you know your stuff like 110%, changing your content on the spot, like saying you work with this company instead of this company, it'll be like it'll just come off your tongue. So like I think impromptu is really where your work shows, but the pre-conference stuff is equally as important for it to actually work in your presentations.
Okay. And now kind of jumping specifically into that presentation, right? I know you mentioned confidence and how it's really key towards like standing out, but I think that's, something that we hear a lot. So what would you say is like, what's the biggest way that we can go about, either building that confidence, or if that's something that, we've continued to struggle with, what's another way that we can really stand out in these role plays or in these selling events to our judges?
Um, that's a good question. I think that it's really related to how you're feeling as well. So when I say confidence, what I'm saying is you have no worry in your mind about how you're performing. And why I say that is because everyone is at some different um, point in time of their journey of being a salesperson, point in time of learning how to get these DECA events down, right? So that you can't really change until you really work on it. But the thing you can change immediately is your nervousness before the event and knowing that you are giving a better present, like and not to sound in a way that will put others down, but you have to come in to that presentation thinking that your company, your sales pitch, and the way you're speaking is better than everyone else that judge has seen. May not be that case, but if you think it, you're able to present what's in your mind in a much, much better format. So that's really what I think is important in the confidence realm. Was there another part of the question or?
I guess like kind of besides that, right? Like confidence, yes, it's really crucial, really key, but what are some of the other ways that we can really, like stand out? Like what like confidence is one step of the equation, but how do we like, use that and combine it with something else in order to really improve our chances to do better in all of those presentations?
I think in terms of so again, it's content and delivery. Content wise, my recommendations are picking something that stands out by going to the third or fourth page of Google results. right? When you're looking for a company. It's also looking for companies that are very well established, companies that are can wow a judge. If it wows you, it can wow a judge, right? So it's like some type of new technology or something that's very futuristic, not futuristic, but something that really is you know surprising. Another thing is also, I think, if you have a lot of details in your plan, but they're not like overwhelming, like you don't have like 35 text boxes on your slideshow. I think if you have a lot of details, it really helps you stand out again in terms of the research. So that's another thing. Like, for example, in my junior year, the HTTPS prompt was like, you have to integrate touchless technology in an amusement park. So I made an imaginary amusement park and I drew a map of it. And then on the map, I like pinpointed exact locations, exact types of machines, and where exactly everything would be placed so that it strategically works for the customers. So like you don't have to like fully talk about it in detail, but as long as they think that there's more layers to what he's saying, that helps a lot. And I think the last thing would definitely be let's see. In terms of delivery, oh yeah, I think that the last thing would definitely be details for the judge. So when you're speaking, there's a certain way to approach and there's a certain way to end. And the most important, and I think this is the last rule I stand by, the most important like advice I would share for anyone. Your first 1 minute or 30 seconds to 1 minute of your presentation is the most crucial. If your introduction is solid, if it makes you stand out, if you know that 100%, it will boost your role play like so much. And if you end it correctly as well. So I think that is probably my actually biggest piece of advice that I've said today or I will say today. So yeah.
That's great. Going into like more of the exam portion, how do you study for the exams and like what do you think it mainly focuses on?
Um, yeah, my exam scores were never that good, I'll be honest with you. So uh, it's kind of hard for me to give advice on that. I do think that we have it in Limburg that we say that the exam won't get you on stage, but can definitely keep you off of it. So I think you have to put more time or equal amount of time in your exam preparation as your presentation. I was confident in my presentation, so I kind of didn't focus on the exam too much, but I would recommend studying, doing obviously all the practice tests from previous years. And each conference is going to have a different style, different subset of PIs. And then if you really want to study, I think that looking at each and every PI and then the definitions of each PI would really help because each question is based off of it. And then obviously you need to be up to date on like modern news, modern stuff. So like just read about business, read about hospitality and tourism. I think that should complement, supplement your, I guess, studying for that exam.
Okay. And well, kind of moving on to like the core components of the presentation, right? Those performance indicators. So for you specifically, how are you studying for and like how are you hitting each of these performance indicators to the best of your ability? And say when you're throwing a curveball, you're given a performance indicator and you can't really figure out what to do with it based on the prompt, what's your approach
This
to
is a
going
role play,
forward?
right? We're talking about role play here.
Role play, or I think even for professional selling, they do still have performance indicators, right? It's just the
Well, I don't
same
think so.
ones though.
Yeah, the same ones every year, but
Yeah,
like
yeah,
those
yeah.
are like very standard.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
judges don't look at the PIs that much there, but I think that like let's just say a rubric for professional selling
Hmm.
and then PIs. So linking it back into like real world examples is a good clutch. Again, defining each PI very clearly and very like specifically is obviously the best idea for that. Make sure you state exactly what you want to say about it. And if you don't know a PI, like it's kind of hard to save that point. I'll be honest. Like you kind of have to know it because the judge is going to know like when you're like not able to fully define it. Like you can beat around the bush. You can say like some general definition, but it's not, it may or may not get you there. But the one way to help is by using these real life examples. And those can help add that further understanding for the judge to see that, oh, you actually know how this works in the real life. Maybe you don't know how it's actually defined, so it should be fine. So, quote like business schools, quote research studies, quote real world examples, like famous blue chip stocks like Apple, Walmart, etc. You can there's lots of ways to go up on it. So I think that's probably the best thing. And then for professional selling, don't like the rubric is like, if you have your presentation down like a lot, like if you have it down and if you know everything about it, the rubric, your presentation will automatically fill the rubric. So don't build a presentation necessarily fully to the rubric. Like obviously have all the contents it requires, but just use that as a baseline to see like what you need in your presentation. But the structure, the format, the delivery, all of that has to be up to your creativity. And if it's not, if you're just basing off the rubric, you're basically looking like everyone else in the event. So yeah.
All right, that's cool. And lastly, what ideas do you have for sort of this year's topic? It's kind of about like sustainability or like assuming the role of a sales representative for a company specializing in sustainable products. Like, where do you think people should start their research? Like, what companies do you think they could potentially focus on? What areas could they take their presentation in?
Okay. So I think there's two different ways to go upon it. And again, it's based on the judge. So a younger judge is obviously going to be more inclined towards sustainability and using more modern practices. Older judges are, I guess, less knowledgeable of that. What I do think is reading up on the most up-to-date sustainable news would be very useful because there may be some facts or there may be some information that they may not know of. And it may be stuff that is, obviously supporting the fact that climate change is happening a lot, or maybe debunking some facts that are not completely true, but a lot of people believe it. In that sense, you're able to stand out because again, it seems like you've done your research. So if you're able to like say, hey, by the way, getting electric vehicles, this is just hypothetical. If you getting electric vehicles actually does not help the environment or something along the lines, not too outrageous, I think you can stand out because they'll be like, oh, this is the guy who like not only did I learn from, but also taught me something new with his company. So in the pre-research area, I think that would be useful. And then, so it's a local hotel chain, sustainable product options. Some new technology would be very useful. There's a lot of already sustainable, practices in the hotel industry, like obviously the way they operate their housekeeping services, the way they operate some of their products and their vendors. Look into some new technology, something that's brand new, something that's not like, okay, not obviously super brand new, but something that's kind of unique that will catch the eye when you see it. Like if you went to a hotel and you saw it, like, that was pretty cool. I think sure the judge will see it in the same way. So I think that would be useful, but don't choose something that, that's already been done. That is not useful at all. Like the previous three times, I had, touchless technology, we had virtual running, and we also had a glamping experience. So all of those were completely new experiences, like one of a kind. You can't find them anywhere else. If your product or service if you're able to find that anywhere else with any other company, you've chosen the wrong company. So that's my personal opinion on that.
Okay. Thanks so much, Krish. Those were kind of the questions that we had written up for you, but we want to open up the floor now. If anybody in the Zoom call right now has any questions, wants to either unmute or drop them in the chat, we'd love to hear them, and I'm sure Krish would love to answer them. Okay, so I have one question that got DM'd to me. Um, so Krish, here's kind of a situation for you, is what they're saying. Let's say, you're doing your role play and you're kind of lost on what to do, you're kind of freezing up. What would you say is, the best way to kind of distract your judge or to, kind of get back into the flow of role plays?
Um, I think like let's just say you're blanking, right? Like you're blanking on what you've prepared for. You're not, you just don't know what that PI is. I think just focus on the strong suits. So skip to something you've maybe already talked about and expand it. there's no point filling empty space or empty time with more uhs or whats or give me a moment to think or switching to your partner, right? I think just revert right back to what you were talking about, but expand upon it. So if there's, let's just say there's five different things you want to talk about, and three out of the five things you're not remembering, just two things. If you do two things really, really, really well versus five things mediocrely, it's a complete different like change of pace. So I think just focus on what you already know. If you prepared correctly, then you should have stuff on your mind already to speak. But in terms of the judge, sometimes it depends. You have to read the judge, maybe engaging them in a question. That could also help to give you some time to think. You could also say, if they ask you a question, you have no idea what they're saying, you can say, that's a really great question and give you a good 5 seconds to think. These are pretty standard common practices that I'm sure all of you guys already know about, but employ those and revert back to what you already know. It helps a lot.
Okay, and I think Sagar had a question in the chat. He asked, what's the secret behind your versatility between writtens and role plays? How are you able to see success in both of them?
I think that I did BTDM my second year because first of all, it's all because of the delivery. If you're able to speak well, if you're able to really engage with your judge well, doesn't really matter which event you're doing, it all comes through. So I think focusing on that really helps a lot. And then for me, I did HTPS my sophomore year, got sixth place, but I wanted to change the pace to see if there's more success in other events. So I think that don't limit yourself only to one event and have that flexibility and that mindset that you can perform equally as well in the other event. I think that really unlocks a different um I guess unlocks a different version of you where you're able to replicate your performance in one area into the other.
Okay. And Shrestha had a question. What are some of your best tips to, end strong in a role play? And the same thing for a written. What are some key points you want to hit when you're closing off with the judge?
Definitely. I think the role play and the presentation ending off is quite similar, doing a quick recap, obviously what you talked about, but you have to diffuse a situation. You've just talked to someone for 10 to 15 minutes and they've been quiet and listening. Like there's no way they haven't got distracted. Obviously they have, right? So the way to diffuse is to engage them and to also give them some relaxation in their mind. And the way to do that is by first saying that, hey, we're going to meet again in the next week. I'll give you all this information. I'll email it to you so you have more time to look over it so that you're not just cramped in this session. And then we'll relink in a week and then we can discuss about it. So it seems like they have more time to think about it. And I think the second thing is saying that you will handle more things for them than they're thinking. When dropping something in HTTPS or roleplay, you're saying basically, hey, this is all I've thought of. Make the decision yourself, right? Instead, say, hey, my friend in the finance, my colleague in the finance department will handle this area in the next week or something like that. Kind of helps tie everything back together and show you that the judge is not the only person who is dependent on making that decision, and he has assistants. So that's a good way. But again, the first 30 seconds, the last 30 seconds are most important. So have a lot of unique follow-up that you can help out with. One thing is on HTTPS, I gave them my personal phone number and I said, you can reach me personally on my actual phone. And that helped a lot because it made it seem like this is not just a presentation. This is obviously a conversation, a business relationship. So that's a big thing.
Okay. And then there was one from Bhavya. What do you think is the best way to, get started in the brainstorming process, specifically for the professional selling events? How do you get started? I know you mentioned like being on that third or fourth page of Google to choose your company, but even
Mm.
before that, like what are you brainstorming? What are you thinking? How do you break down that prompt? What are you doing?
I think that one thing that helps, I don't know if this is the best method, if this will make you choose the best company, but imagine you had to start a company and you're selling a product to that vendor, then model and go find a company that's similar to your ideas, and that helps a lot. So my sophomore year when I did HTTPS for the first time, I had no idea how this worked. And I actually made a fake company and a fake vendor. Everything was like completely artificial in my district's presentation. I found out that you can be DQ'd if it's not a real, representation of a company by my state's conference. But basically, I was able to find like that. I had a 1 day pivot, and the only reason I was able to pivot into an actual company is because I already knew exactly what I would want to sell to someone through my creativity. So then I was able to find a company just like it. So brainstorm and act like you had to invent that solution yourself, and then find something that's similar to it, but obviously luxurious and credible. Again, choosing boutiques is one way to go, but I would not recommend it. Like I'm sure, like AJ, you did PSC one of the years, and you chose Rippling for your company. That's a pretty big company. I chose companies that make upwards of 50 to $100 million in revenue compared to boutiques again that are less than $1 million. So in the brainstorming process, have some baseline foundations and requirements of a company, and then try to model it after what's in your mind.
Okay. Thank you very much. And the last question we have, and I guess the one we can use to kind of finish off, is from Parth. And he was just asking, outside of DECA, what's your favorite quote that you try to abide and live by? And I think that's a good way we can end off.
Yeah, I think the best quote is okay. I don't really got a quote, but I think that give me a sec. Let me think. Oh, I got it. I read this on the internet the other day, so it's not really my quote, but I think it should help. The only place where you'll find success before work is in the dictionary. So I think that's a pretty good quote. I think people can use that. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Krish. It's been a pleasure having you today. You had some great answers. It was very insightful. And thank you to everyone who joined in today. We hope it was helpful. And if you have any other questions, I'm sure we'll all be available to answer anything. But yeah, thank you so much, guys.